Appears to be 7 o'clock, and so that's starting time for our meeting. So I'd like to call to order our July 6th, 2023 meeting of the Ferrysburg Planning Commission. Craig, could you read the roll, please?
Chairman Rifle.
Present.
Commissioner Tuggle.
Here.
Commissioner Hawley. Commissioner Carlson.
Here.
Commissioner Jonas.
Still here.
Commissioner Schulberg. Commissioner Weber.
Here.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to apologize to my fellow Planning Commission members for my late absence from last week or last month's meeting. Something came up at the last minute, and I wasn't able to send you all a memo, but I did tell Craig I wasn't going to be here. And Virginia, you weren't here either, I guess. And so Roger took over, and he knows what to do. So thank you all.
Your able assistant stepped in on that one, so it just bailed you out, John.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I move to excuse Commissioner Hawley?
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We give an absence to Commissioner Hawley for this meeting. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Mission passed. Consideration for approval, the July 6, 2023 agenda. Craig has prepared an agenda for us. Any additions, corrections, changes that anyone would like to make in that agenda? Okay, you're going to move that we accept the agenda as prepared. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, we've unanimously accepted it. I do want to remind fellow commissioners, again, as we usually do, that we're live here, and please speak into your microphone so that people out in distant land can hear you clearly. And if anyone comes to the podium to speak up there, please speak clearly into the microphone. Thank you. All right, consideration for approval, the June 8th, 2023 meeting minutes as printed. Craig has prepared the minutes, and are there any additions, changes, corrections to be made to those minutes as prepared? If not, Chair will entertain a motion to accept them as prepared.
Motion to accept.
It's been moved and seconded. We accept the minutes of the June 8th meeting as prepared. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, we've accepted them. Thank you. Okay, now we're down to public comments. It's customary in the Ferrysburg Planning Commission meetings to give members of the public the opportunity to share any thoughts that they may have with us about agenda items. When we have public hearings, we ask if you have something to say about the item on a public hearing to come to the podium at that time, but we really don't have any public hearings tonight. So if anyone would like to share anything with us, please come to the podium, state your name and your address. And I would also note that there is an opportunity late in the meeting to also share comments with us. So would anyone like to share any thoughts with us? Okay. Oh, nope. Okay. Not seeing anyone coming to the podium, let's close the public comment section at 7:04. And let's move to item number 6, pre-application conference, Brockmeyer Development. And is Mr. Brockmeyer here? Okay, please come and share with us what you got going.
I am David Brockmeyer. I live at 17753 168th Avenue. And that address is part of this conversation around this development. And before I start, I just want to say thank you to you members of the commission serving tonight. It's a beautiful week of weather we're having. And everybody might be still recovering from 4th of July, so I'll try and be brief. I'm only going to talk for 2 or 3 hours, so I hope that'll work. Okay, so Craig, are we good? What I'm going to cover tonight is basically my house, my neighbor's house, combining those 2 parcels, development of PUD. And I wanted to start, and I think everybody has received the deck, right? And hope you've had a chance to read it. So try not to read it myself, but it's and of course jump in with any questions at any point. But I started this, 6 or 8 months ago when my neighbor approached me about selling his house, and I bought the house from my neighbor Norm Beebe. We've lived there for 25 years. My wife and I, Paige, raised our kids here. We've had a fantastic experience in Ferrysburg. We love the area, and I've always kind of had an eye towards developing this piece of land, if I could. And Norm approached me and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about moving," and I asked him if he would like to come in on this development with me, and he would prefer just to sell the property. So that's what we're going to do. But anyway, I started out. I'm going to cover kind of the city, the master plan stuff. Then I'll go into how our development fits in that, and actual development, seeing the design concept that we have, and then we'll talk about the environmental issues that we are having to deal with, and how we that, and then we'll cover the zoning variances. And it's all in the deck, but please feel free to ask questions as we go along or save to the end. So I took this right out of the master plan. It says, looking to develop residential at all different price points, especially ones that have shared focal point features and PUDs. So, we're not the largest parcel for sure. It's only about 3 acres, but I know there are other much larger parcels in the city that we want to get developed as well. But infill is pretty critical to what's going on around here. We're running out of land that we can develop new homes in, and this would be a great opportunity. So just to give you an idea, just to state about the zoning. Next slide. Properties here. Owned one. There's no R1. There's no rezoning that needs to happen. So that is definitely a plus. Next slide, Craig, please. Again, that's just a visual of where it is. There's 68 is. So these are the 2 parcels Paige and I bought 25 years ago. We remodeled it and added on to it. Our barns. Total, this is 200 feet of street frontage, 230 feet of water frontage. Fine. My lot goes out to about 563 from the street, and about 490 from the side. There's this little cutback. When that got sold to the neighbors before my time, but they took that little parcel. And if you can go to the next slide. Again, about little less than 3 acres. 5, on the exact, but it's close to that. This doesn't show it all the way, but this is a representation of the original plat. This is our survey that we had done a long time ago when we bought the house. Between these 2 parcels, this was originally this parcel, Norm's parcel, the one north of us, the one south of us. It was supposed to be West Spring Lake subdivision. It was originally intended to be homes. Our 2 parcels are 15 units. That was intended originally by the city planners. I don't know when that came into play, if that was 1930 or something. But that was the original intention. You'll notice that there's got 25 feet of. Neighbor got 25 feet of. This is before my time, before we moved here. And the same thing is true on the north end of my neighbor Norm's. There was another street there. I forget the name of it off the top of my head. But all told, there were 15 home lots meant to be here, and then plus the other neighbors north and south had more lots. I think 8 per lot, per address. And so again, meant to be homes. That was the original intent. I want to just, this is the disclaimer slide that says this is a concept. So let's not get married to like what the houses look like or anything. Obviously, we'll change and get modified. One of the things that I've been working with our experts on is just getting the layout of the plot to maximize and optimize the real estate. But also, we don't have a builder partner. I'm not a builder. I don't want to really build homes without somebody who is an expert. However, we do have on our team take us all the way through the rough grade. Over there, Bruce Colleen is our engineer. So here's our kind of disclaimer slide, just saying, take it with a salt. All the details. We know they're going to change. So let's dive in. This again, you can't see it very well, but you see the property here. South, neighbor across the street, Eddie Johnson there. Just gives you an overview of where this location is. Slide, please. Here's the proposed layout. But we have all the subdivision. Three homes with a very, very large space and a dock. So the intention is build 11 homes. We selected kind of rectangular square or rectangular shape, 2 stories, just to kind of demonstrate like what the largest would be. Largest footprint of a could be in this proposed development. Thinking there'll be 2,000 to 3,000 square foot homes, 3-4 bedroom, bath. Some may have basements. We have a basement in our family where we are. We know the way the lot slopes from the road down to the water. So we're probably going to be able to put some basements in there. So those units might be a little smaller, just because you got the lower level that we might do walkouts. But we're estimating that the home values would be between $600,000 and $1 million. I love this property. Every day I sit out there on my. It's just an awesome piece. So the aesthetics of it, the landscaping, open space is really important to me. But I also want to make sure that everybody who buy a home here would have a dock. So that's again just building that community and also maximize. We're estimating the end value would be around $8.5 million built, and that would get the city roughly. How you calculate it, but about $100,000 in additional tax revenue, which I figured out is about 7% for tax revenue, which is a substantial more than I thought it was going to be. But this is how we envision it being laid out. Next slide, please. This is a view from the water. Again, row 1, 2, 3. And we've got this really big that is, it's going to be roughly 1/3 of an acre-ish, or exactly, I'm sorry, 2/3, shared by everybody. Fire pit, shared racks for kayaks and that sort of thing out there. I don't know what else, but that is kind of the thought. So people enjoy the waterfront. The dock layout is still TBD, of course, but we're looking at 11 or 12 slips. Figured we probably want a dozen slip would be for visitors. You know, people are gonna have friends that want to stop by. So that's the view from the water. And again, we're looking at the type of home we thought would work. Um, this is the view from 168th. The layout that we chose here, the design here, has all of these units have front porches facing 168. Driveways and garages are in the back. And do that for a couple of reasons. One is aesthetics. It just looks really good. Public safety is another factor. Traffic. Having 4 homes along here, although there are 4 driveways there with Norm and I, 5. I don't know if I'm extra. But the number of cars. Going to be more cars. So having all of those cars pulling on goes to orient service entrances to the house. So it really unifies it. It's a great view as people are driving by. The orientation for them, just to give you an idea, sitting at the houses like slide, please. Another view from the waterfront dock. This one's from the land. If your areas are represented, and there, and this one is actually from a balcony of one, looking out at the. This one is in row 1, and on the very far north end, ending the deck. The idea is every home will have parking for 2 cars in the driveway. Parking. You can't see it very well here, but we plan to have plenty of landscaping or fencing to use light traffic for the neighbors to diffuse that. Having this is my shown here, but it's right at the front of their house, and it would go right in front of their driveways. Next slide. So here's the interior looking. You're standing in the waterfront. You know, back to 68. And this gives you kind of an idea of how far apart. It's hard to tell what they stand. Units would be about 25 feet apart. Again, we're showing you the largest possible footprint of these homes. We're not actually showing close to the largest. So there may be some give there. Space between the homes might get bigger, but they'll be in the range of 25 feet. Next slide. This is standing on the balcony of idea. We really want to make sure everybody has a view of the water, even if it's for those ones on 168th, even if it's a small one, they still got a view of the water. That's going to be important to us. Next slide, please. Okay, so we'll stop there. Questions?
Did you say there'd be a dock per unit then, basically?
Yes.
Every unit
Yes.
will have a dock?
Yes.
Any extras for guests or whatever?
I think we just have one extra. We could shape the docks, and I've talked to a couple of dock companies, design companies on those, and and we've looked at different options. We just haven't nailed anything down yet. But yes, that's the plan.
Are you envisioning constraining the development of these units to all have sort of the same footprint and the same look as they are in the diagrams? Or will buyers be able to select their own design of a house for those units?
I think it's going to be pretty uniform. So, you know, I'm using Veit's Landing, Gables as an example of marker for what we would try to accomplish.
Chairman, this does remind me a lot of the Gables when John and I were on the planning commission when that whole thing happened, and that was we made one mistake on that, and that was it was supposed to be RG1 is a detached single family, but then we ended up with some pretty good looking coach homes out there.
Yeah.
And I'm familiar with coach homes because we own one in Naples. But I'm just looking at this, and my first reaction is these look like, I know it says in your final design, but they look like they may be houses in Iceland. And to John's point too, different varieties. I know you got different colors, but have you ever thought about combining two zero lot land of coach house? Then you have more space in between, because as close as they are, you said they have a view of the lake. Not much.
Right.
It's a squeezy little blue. I'm just thinking that if the Gables came out pretty good, in my opinion,
Yeah.
and there's a demand for no grass to take care of, and all that. And I'm assuming this is going to be HOA.
Yes.
You propose, okay. Therefore, the people want deck space to sit on, to look at, wraparound decks you can put on there. And I'm not your designer, but I'm just thinking out loud.
Well, you're thinking along the terms that along the lines that I was thinking too. Originally, when I started doing my own very cringing back there, my original drawings, I had the units attached. I had 2 units attached, like two and two, in most of my drawing, and and for that exact reason, a little more green space. But then I didn't know exactly what we could get in here either at that time until we got the topographical survey back, and there was more space for us than I expected, quite frankly, in terms of width. So when Bruce and team started drawing things together, we separated the units for this concept.
Because right now you're at 3.85 units per acre, which is a minimum lot size for RG1 is 10,000 square feet. That means you get 4 per acre, and you're getting just under 4. So this is what I call putting 10 pounds of sugar in a 5-pound bag. But that's okay sometimes, because we talk about the limited space that we have and what's the demand for housing these days. It's not 2-acre lots.
Right. So
anyway, very, very interesting. I spent a lot of time looking at this, obviously. I'm curious.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the question. I think there's my expectation is that once I've got this in the deck as well. You know, we're in conversations with several handful of local developers who, well regarded, built a lot of good stuff in the area. And I would really like to have that partnership kind of locked down sooner rather than later. But they're not going to really want to do that until we get through approval. So I think this is the challenge that I've got is like, okay, we could design something that's really, I think, is awesome. Building partner company. So I want to just be starting those conversations early, so that we can maximize the space. I don't know, and not just maximize it, but optimize it. So there could be, I could foresee situations where there might be smaller units than like maybe the waterfront units down on 168. They might be a little smaller. Depends on what we come up with our building partner. But I also think that there's plenty of opportunity. Again, early concept, take it from there. And sure we're hitting.
The only other issue that came to mind is this almost amounts to spot zoning. And you gotta be very careful on spot zoning. And that is creating something in a neighborhood that's not there already. You're changing it. And I was curious to know how your neighbors felt. It's kind of an interesting, 168th is very interesting when you drive along it. It's pretty mixed. And there's, in my opinion, a lot of room for improvement, put it that way.
Well, yeah, I think so too. So, you know, I have spoken to all my neighbors about this, all my direct neighbors, Betty have across the street. I haven't shown them everything. I haven't shown them all because I've spoken to them. Told them we actually, at one point, talked with some neighbors to the south, potentially participating in this. You know, bring their property in as well, but that they're just not interested in doing it at this point in life with kids, and they got a great backyard, things like that. So I don't know if there's any opposition from my neighbors yet. I just know that I've presented to them. They haven't said, oh, that's a terrible idea, you should never fight it. I haven't heard that from anybody. But I know it'll impact them. They're my friends, especially the guy right next south of me. Together, I'm sure that we're going to be as accommodating for them as could be, and I hope they support it. How they feel it.
Could very well raise property values,
Good. Yeah. I would think it would.
which means your taxes go up too, I'm sorry, but that's the.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a blessing and a curse, right? So every time we see new sales go up and on the bayou, I'm always happy about it. Taxes.
Have to pay the overhead.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I ran this by not this version, but a much earlier version. My chicken scratch drawings past my bolt off. I said, hey, you know, thinking about doing a cul-de-sac, hammerhead, different components, but I ran it by him just to get some. This is months ago, just to get an idea, get his input, how we would potentially develop this, and it was favorable. He had his concerns about certain things, but you know, generally speaking, one of his comments was, "We need more revenue from the city, all the services." Supportive of that. I want to go back to your point about the sign on the houses too. So there are, I think there's going to be a decent amount of, you know, I think that just as I've been really thinking about it recently, I think we're going to have, we need to have that many units for viability of the project. But the shape and size of how those
I thought I would share with you is one issue that your neighbors are probably going to bring up is lines of sight toward the water. And your project extends like 3 layers deep for houses. I'd have to go out there and take a look and see just where that would be, but it will limit the view of neighbors on either north and south of the water. And we have a zoning ordinance requirement on that for waterfront properties.
Yes.
Don't know if you're aware of that or if you've looked at it or know how that will fit. Okay.
I'll get that. I actually addressed that in the deck. And that is actually, Betty had to. She can see the water right now between the houses. And I think that she's going to be able to maintain that for the most part. We'll lose it in one direction and gain in another. So that is the neighbor to the south. Let's, Craig, if you wouldn't mind, let me please ask a couple of to that question. So, wetlands. Yay. Neighbor 2 doors down, 3 doors down. State, ready. Where's the map? On the floor. Hey. I don't know where we are in the floodplain. So, as I noted in the layout that I showed you. I don't know what slide it is. This slide right here shows the line after we had our topographical. Shows this right here. That is the floodplain. So everything, and we had flooding. A lot of people a few years ago, and our flooding. So that is definitely not building. So let's get to your zoning requests. So, of them, waterfront setback is one. The other one is 11 units versus 10 being by a single street. That's the other. Let's cover the waterfront setback next time. So I just cited here in the deck, and the next slide, John, shows. I'm sorry, the next slide, Craig. I go into a lot of words, and I put that in there for you as you were reading this, but there's really, as I understand it, Craig, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Months ago, was kind of came about because of a Michigan front home. Somebody was building kind of in front, so close to severely blocked view of the other neighboring house. So I understand why this ordinance exists, but I think in our case, I can demonstrate if we go to the next slide. My neighbor Scott here. Parks his camper up. So from his back porch, if I talk. Oh, it's mobile. All right. So here's the lot line, and the existing sign line of sight for Scott. We have this barn here that's been there forever. That's kind of what we're using as the existing, right? Is he can't see anything really beyond that, or much more beyond on this side. This would be the proposed line of sight here. So this is the difference for him. Everything here completely untouched, completely clean. He's got 150 feet of frontage that he can look at every single day. Doesn't impact his ability. He can see, even with this building here, it's far enough back that he can almost see across the entirety of my current property from his back porch, which he sits at a lot, as we all do. From this house over here, same situation. You take the line of sight here across to my barn, and believe me, there's all kinds of vegetation. My neighbor Norm is a collector of lots of things. So he has trailers, construction equipment, all kinds of stuff in here. But anyway, and she, on this fence, the lady who lives here, Julie, she has a lot of vegetation. Trees have grown up. They've kind of just let that area grow a little bit wild so that they can, for whatever reason, they just don't do anything about those shrubs that are along the fence. But here's her current, and here's the proposed. Again, she has, like, I think 200 plus feet of frontage she can see directly in front of her house without a problem. So we won't be impacting any of those views directly. It's only if they want to look across our property, across my current property. And so that's, I think, in the spirit of this ordinance, we are not affecting their view in that regard, or their ability to use the waterfront. Any questions on that? That slide is in your deck, and it's a little easier to see. But I'm happy to have you out to my house. We can walk around. Happy hour is usually around 5. And it's hard to tell from these drawings, I know, but eventually I'd love to have you out to walk around and get a better sense of where things are going to sit. I also just noted, I put this in the deck, that it's just would be very limiting and could potentially make the project not viable if we are forced to comply with that ordinance in manner with, because we would be and that's not so. That's just something we have to. Second, the next slide is 11 units serviced on the street instead of 10. Again, we talked about this a lot about how do we address this, and we could move a unit or two, base 168th. I don't think anybody's going to like that, frankly, and would kind of damage the cohesiveness of the community. Impact that, and traffic would be an issue as well. So we're going to be asking for a variance on that. But other than that, I think we hit all the marks. And like John, you were saying, you know, we're got to be over 10,000 square foot. We're at 10,008. This is with the size that we're representing. Other questions?
First, are the roads going to be to code? I know in some subdivisions, the roads are not to code, and I know in Nunica, they won't plow, they won't repair the roads. The people have to do that as a condominium unit. Will these roads be maintainable by the city? They will be to code?
Yes. Yeah, we've got that reflected there. If you look at this drawing here, we kept it at 26 feet. Portion of that is sidewalk, a small portion of that. And I know I've gone around and I've measured some other streets just to see where they come in. And that's our intention, is to keep it there. That's a conversation I have with Mike too, making sure we face things.
Other question is, I lived on a development in Indiana on a floodplain, 100-year flood. We were supposed to be safe, and I took my babies and Irish setter out in a fireman's boat. You know, it wasn't fun. So have you looked at the variations of the floodplain over the 100 years, and there's no chance this is going to increase through some catastrophic, Mother Nature can't really be controlled, so.
Yeah, you know, yeah, they don't, but water doesn't stay within the lines. Did you want to comment?
Bruce going, with regard to the drive. So we have designed it so that make it appear small. We put a 20-foot push, 6 inch. That 20 meet all of the needs of the fire department. Yet make it appear small, narrow, and slow to traffic, and residents, pedestrians to stay inside rather than willy-nilly, and everybody. So with regard to the floodplain, so recently Eagle lowered the floodplain elevation, which makes no sense to me, from 584 to 520. We're going to keep them above, a foot above the old floodplain elevation, 5 for the minimum opening. So we're aware. Yeah, we all live here. We kind of,
The street's wide enough for fire equipment to get back in there?
Yes, that's, yeah, that's.
And they'd have to, but there's no turnaround area
Well,
though.
they allow a hammer. We talked to them.
You can, you
So-
back out partially
Yep.
and back in.
Yeah, there'll be a hydrant down. Houses are close reach.
And there's you have enough easement for the utilities.
Oh, yeah,
They're
we'll make sure,
required.
yep, we've kept the buildings away so that we can get at least a 10-foot wide easement down adjacent. Just keep in mind, it's not a public roadway, so we don't need a 66-foot right-of-way. Need room for our utilities. We're gonna have water and sewer. And again, this is one of those benefits of infill, when you already have all your infrastructure in place, is trying to optimize, especially when we're all like on a peninsula or can't grow. So roadway, all of the things that people are looking for and make development easy without contributing to urban sprawl here. So we've got room for all of the utilities. Question?
Have you had a chance to look at this? More to come, right? More to come.
That's the beauty of a PUD is the give and takes that go with that, and the impact of the neighboring residences, but a small little wedge of the benefit that they have. So it's unfortunate when you look at the properties that everybody lacked the foresight or knew that this new rule was going to be coming, that created this new waterfront setback because everybody pushed their houses right up next to the road when there's all of this huge expanse of land behind them. So it's unfortunate, contrary to what the old planners had in mind when they had this thing platted back in. But so it's really bringing back what the planners had, envisioned for this area. And it's unfortunate that the ordinance was written such as it is, that it precludes any of that development. So, it's, like I said, beauty of PUD is that give and take and considerations for the benefit of the community, nice quality.
Say you're okay to go ahead with this, or you're just presenting this to us so we have a heads up of what might be coming.
Really, this conversation is more for feedback. It's an awareness for you as well, but to get any feedback, your questions, comments, to help us present something, to address any concerns that we've got when we actually do formally. Wasn't expecting one.
Probably wanting to know how we might be leaning so you don't waste time working on something that would be rejected down the road. And I guess maybe we ought to talk about it a little bit among ourselves here. So let us.
Sure, that sounds great. No, that's great.
Colleagues, what are your thoughts here?
I think it's a very unique development. I wrote down a lot of different notes throughout his presentation or prior to his presentation, and actually live right around the corner. I've been on this property, and I do want to note that the overlay district is right around the corner. So this, if there was some concern about 168th and the housing, the overlay district being right around the corner, it does kind of match the character of that with the close proximity of the homes. I agree with Roger. I do think 168th could definitely use a little TLC here and there. But yeah, I'm interested just to continue to learn more about it. And I do think that the tax revenue for the city is a huge benefit.
Thank you, Joe. Anyone else?
One more thing, and that is addressing this line of sight issue. It would seem like, as we've seen developments go around the lake and around the bayous, there's a need for access to the water, number one. We know that. They're not making any more water, so therefore that's limited. We've seen some pretty good developments on that bayou back there. This bayou is incredible, what it used to be. There are some infill areas, in 168th is one of them, where if this project were to go through, for example, I think would encourage other people to take advantage of that access to the water. Because over the years, if you drive, it's like I say, you drive down 168th, it's been there for a long time. You know, and back in the days when you know, I lived on a farm too, and we had buildings and all kinds of outbuildings and everything. So it kind of developed, started that way, but I think it would encourage people to move further away from the road back towards the water, in my opinion.
I would just say that we have very little land left to develop in Ferrysburg, right, Craig? Not many acreages at all, so we need to consider that. We also have to consider that if tax revenues would be 7% of the 2023 tax revenue projections for the year, that's something to consider carefully as well.
I'm interested to learn more, and I'm interested to see what David has to say with his feedback as well. So I think it's a great opportunity. Just looking to learn some more.
What I think we don't want to do is give you a false hope, and then when it comes up for further discussion, you have a bunch of neighbors who show up and say, hey, I didn't really know about that, and this is really not fair, and you're violating the zoning ordinance as it now exists. And they could get steamed. We've seen that before. So you're doing the right thing by coming here and running it past us. I think maybe we should ask David, or you already see the issues here and have shared what you think about it, or would you like to give some thought to it and give us some feedback?
Yeah, I can give it a bit more review against the master plan and Chapter 8 as well. Question, is this going to be a site condominium or conventional condo? Okay. We'll still need to see, although there are no lot lines, so it's conventional condo. It's not a site condo where there would be units, which limited common element around your home itself. So the entire open space around those homes would be general common element, I'm assuming. So we would still actually need to see, I would call them imaginary lot lines, so that we can base the dimensional requirements for, it's on page 8.4. So the front setback, side setback, separation, lot size. So we would have to review it as, you know, if it was platted in a way. So I would almost come like you can provide a comparable exhibit to, like, if it was platted, and where those lines would be, and how you would take those dimensions. And so once you do that, then you may find that you need other variations from dimensional requirements. You look like you don't understand. Home lot size, setbacks from side and rear property lines, and so on. So yeah, and that's what I said. The entire area is general common element. But we have to, if we're going to compare this against other developments in the city, we need to consider separation, setbacks from the road, rear setbacks, as if they were there. So, and we understand they're not going to be there. Well, we would have to. I would recommend drawing up a plan with you know, imaginary lots, so that you're showing 650 feet comparable. So this is something that we need to be able to compare to the zoning ordinance. And you're just saying we're not going to have setbacks, lot sizes, and that. So you can't do that. You would actually have to request a variation to that, and we need to be able to compare that to the zoning ordinance. So I'm going to ask you, what is your front setback? Well, yes, it's supposed to be that, yeah. Yeah, and we need to be able to see that. So I'm saying, yeah. Correct, but we still need to review it as if, we still need to review against zoning requirements. A conventional condo, you don't just throw away the zoning dimensional requirements. You have to be able to compare it against something. I can talk about this offline a bit, but so if I ask you what is your side setback for this property, what are you going to tell me? Per unit. Yeah. So the zoning requirement is that it's a 10-foot side setback. So you can't respond in that it's irrelevant because it's a requirement. So what we'd have to do, you'd have to put in those imaginary lines as if it were, so that we can compare it to the zoning requirements. So just because it's conventional condo, any conventional condo, we don't just throw away dimensional requirements because it's that type of ownership. So we need something to be able to compare, and you may find that other variations are needed. And again, this is not something to derail the project. I'm just saying that if we're going to compare against all the requirements of the zoning ordinance, we're going to have to see, in a way, lot lines that don't actually exist, just for comparison purposes. You'll need to know what your side setbacks would be if there were lot lines, so that we can compare it and give you that waiver. I mean, not, the density is not really a question. It's, I think it's 3 units per acre is the recommended from the master plan. I think there's a ability to get the density bonuses. So again, like it's for instance, the conventional condo, it's if you're just saying that everything outside of the walls of the building is open space, and so we have 70% open space, so we can maximize our density bonus. That's, I would say that you would have to subtract 6,500 square feet per unit to be able to find a comparable density, because you could not do a conventional condo and say that all of your general common element around the units are open space, because if someone did a comparable platted development, they don't get that benefit. Their yards don't count as open space. So we need to see how they compare. So what I'm saying is because this is a different form of ownership, you don't qualify to have all yard space as open space in your calculations.
David, if I could maybe jump in just a little, are you saying if they take what they have there on the schematic and draw lot lines, plat that out, draw lot lines with what they have and see how it compares? Yep.
Comparison reasons,
Yep.
yes. And
So all you have to do is each one of those, make it a lot, right?
exactly.
And so you, imaginary lots. That's everything. But then you get back to, how's that, if you want a variance to, on the PUD, for example, then there's a basis to go back to and say, it would have been, and this is what you're asking for. Understand? I don't want to get off into the theoreticals about kind of what site condo and conventional condo, because it's only ownership yet form. But anyway, just draw lines with what you have right there. Yep.
For instance, 11 units at 6,500 square feet is a total of 71,500 square feet. So they could be counting that toward open space when that's a minimum lot size for this, if it was platted or site condo. So I'm just saying I wouldn't qualify that open space that is your minimum lot size comparably to the overall project, because it's not cheating, but it's just it's not really comparable in a way. You could say that we have 75% open space and we're going to maximize our density bonus if you do that.
You can't have it both ways.
Just saying we just need a way to be able to compare this to a conventional site condo or platted development, just so that we can make the comparisons and then just properly itemize all the variations that would be necessary. It's just because you're a conventional condo does not mean that we just don't consider all of the applicable zoning requirements. We'd have to waive them.
So David, before you can provide us some feedback here, do you need to have them provide those lot lines and so forth?
Part of the application process, that can be provided.
So you could prepare your thoughts on this project for us without seeing anything additional from them? Is that what we're saying?
Well, are you asking for more formal preliminary comments from me on the entire project?
Yes.
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah, I think that would probably be helpful. As you guys be spending a lot of money working on this, you'd like to kind of know whether this is going to be likely to go or not. So I don't know what your timeline is either. Our next meeting is a month away. Yeah. That's what we're trying to provide to help you. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Our next meeting's likely to be canceled, right? In Coast Guard.
If nothing comes in major, we're going to cancel the August meeting.
So that would mean feedback that you would get from us would be like 2 months out. Okay?
Dave, can you use the microphone? Where's the microphone, please?
Sorry, Craig. That's fine.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of other work to do.
We,
on our end.
we absolutely don't like to slow down developers here. If they're up and running and want to get things done, we want to assist you to make that happen. But there's some issues with this project, and I think we ought to, the commission here ought to be on the same page here, sort of, whether we're saying, yeah, this looks like it could be a go, or, hey, you know, this is seriously so many concerns that you don't know if you're going to make it or not. And I think you want to hear that from us.
Mr. Brockmeyer, your intention is to live on the property, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, so you definitely have an interest in it.
Love it there. So,
Anyone else like to share any thoughts with us? So are we good to go?
Good to go.
Yeah, so David, if you could prepare something for us, that would be appreciated. And thank you very much for your presentation, and very interesting idea here. So.
thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's time. If there are any other questions, in the meantime, you can always reach out.
Okay. We're down to agenda item number 7, work session, master plan. And David shared a little memo with us here. David, would you like to just hit the highlights here, and then I certainly have some thoughts about this, and some of the rest of us also have thoughts.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the Planning Enabling Act requires the Planning Commission to review its master plan every 5 years. So there's not a requirement to update the master plan, but you have to review it, and that review needs to be reflected on meeting minutes. So just having the conversation today and it being reflected on the minutes satisfies the requirement of the Planning Enabling Act. But during those reviews, jurisdictions will commonly find that there might be goals or objectives, or the future land use plan may no longer be relevant. It may no longer align with the perspectives and desires of your citizens. And so in some cases, maybe it could be every 10 years or so, a master plan is fully updated at that point. But that's to the discretion of the Planning Commission and the City Council. So when I reviewed the plan, I kind of took that in mind. Have we really been, are we getting proposals that are far off from what we're planning for? Is there anything, are we not being able to address changing conditions in the city? Are principal goals and principles still valid based on conversations over the last 5 years? So, overall, I think that the master plan is still a pretty accurate guide and still pretty valid for your decision making. Obviously, you could update some of the information like demographics, vacant land inventory, things like that. You could have a conversation about the goals and principles to see if they are still applicable and relevant. The future land use map, it seems to me it's still probably pretty valid. We made a couple adjustments a few years ago during the last update. And then the implementation table, some of the actions may have been completed, some may no longer apply, and then some could be amended or revised. So I guess, so what I would recommend is if you are satisfied with the master plan as it is, and you still feel it provides you with the proper guidance for your land use decision making, it can stay as is. But if you'd like to update some of the data and inventory, or go through process of updating the implementation table, you can do that officially. And if you decided to go that way, we would have to open it up and go through the formal process. So that would involve notifying our neighboring communities and other public agencies review process and your work, and then a 42-day review period by those same jurisdictions and agencies, recommendation, and then city council approval. So just to open up and make any change at all would be at minimum 3 or 4 months. Full updates, obviously, most of you were involved in our previous effort, could take up to a year in some cases if it was a significant endeavor.
I guess I've served on this body a long time, and maybe Craig can correct me if I'm going the wrong way here, but my recollection is every 5-year period when this comes up, we've done something. And I could be wrong, but I've got a whole stack of these things from 5-year periods. And indeed, you could update the demographics and so forth a little bit. But as I looked at what was here and saw what was in there, I'm thinking this might actually be a time when we don't need to do this. But I may be wrong, and I'm happy to do whatever you folks would like to do. And am I correct about that, Craig? Have we usually done something or not?
Correct,
Yeah,
yes.
that's what I thought.
I'd have to coordinate it with a report of the Economic Development Task Force. Or there's some things we need to coordinate with that.
Done.
They have recommendations that were approved by council that we're responsible for. That's why I'm wondering if we don't have to.
We have to do some things for that. Yeah, we're gonna respond to that.
Other thing that I wanted to point out is I was the one that had this information about North Muskegon, because I think what impressed me about this is they had multiple opportunities for citizens to give input. They didn't just do something and do a survey and have a few people in. They had over 500 people at multiple opportunities to comment on how they wanted the city to go. Landowners, business owners, even people just having an interest in North Muskegon. And I think it might be something we'd want to look at, to having more public input, because you can see what's happened in the township with people that weren't given a chance to speak, and we sure don't want that. And I don't think that this body has ever been negligent in listening to the people, but maybe we need a little bit more input from people, especially with something like this coming up, something like we've just seen tonight.
Our previous updates have involved citizen participation. We've invited citizens to come in. So Virginia, you're suggesting maybe we should do something here.
Important to us, and we want to work with them, but the people we serve are the residents here that pay our taxes and build their families here. So I think any input you can get is good.
Have so little land left to do anything with. It's pretty limiting. That my fear is we're at the 5-year period now. You go another year, and you're a year out of date. You're 6 years. You're not really 5 years. There are some things that I would like to see updated for sure, and demographics is one, and because that includes areas around us, the townships and everything, as far as what the ages are, what the median homes are. There's a lot of things that we'd like to compare ourselves to see where we stand. In my opinion, I think we're getting older in Ferrysburg. I could be wrong, but if that's the case, then housing would reflect that too. So I don't know. There's a lot of things that can go there. So demographics is one. I'm not sure if that's a huge change, but future land use map I think can stay the same. We talked about if something comes up for rezoning, we can be on it. Mm-hmm. We're willing to do that, but I don't see any big point in that. So the other thing is, anytime you put down goals and objectives, it's, there's a difference between doable and not doable. And sometimes we get, and I've been involved with same number as John on these planning, and these things, and we write down goals, and they sit on the shelf and collect dust. You don't pull them out and look at them. And I'm guilty as anybody else of that. So I'm not sure if that serves a useful purpose. And also, I don't know if we want to look at chapter 3 cover page and see if that picture ought to be changed. I don't think so, but then.
Making this decision, we also need to look at the makeup of our body. I mean, I'm relatively new, so I've never been through this process. I know there are some others that are newer. Roger, if your seat gets replaced, that could be a new person. So there's the potential to have 3. Sandy, I don't know if you were in it 5 years ago, but.
I was on the other side. I was in the audience, yes.
Yeah. So it's just, yeah, I know it's interesting because John, you've been through it probably multiple times, and then I've never been through it. So I would support looking at it because I'm anxious to learn, but if everyone else feels opposite, I can wait another 5 years.
Support looking at it, and I have been through it, and it is a big process. It's not something that we should decide just because it's a lot of work. Well, let's not do it. I think it's important to look at it. If you remember right, the sand mine had we had a beautiful plan for that with mixed unit developments and shops and everything else, and well, poof, gone like that, and we had no control over that. So I think that, like you say, goals can be hard to implement, but I think it's a good process to look at.
I'm hearing mixed thoughts here, so I'm looking around my fellow commissioners here, and
May I speak?
you may speak.
Okay, very good. I would second what Regina is talking about with the economic development report. Some of the other things that come to mind, I just jotted a few ideas down here real quick. In terms of the residences that people can afford to buy, there's a lot of people that will say that work down in downtown Grand Haven that can't afford to live anywhere close to Grand Haven or even Ferrysburg. And is tiny houses something that we need to look at, or smaller dimensions, and allowing them to be allowable in our community, particularly since we don't have that much land. I'm concerned about what's going to happen with the Verplanks property because of the fact that they've expanded so much in Muskegon on the BC Cobb power plant. What's the future going to foretell for them in terms of using Verplanks dock here for that bulk cargo that can come right into Muskegon easily and not have freighters have to back in and everything else. Ottawa Sands, as that thing continues to get rolling, that whole corridor out on North Shore Drive, it's like, okay, what are we going to do with it? What's the future long-term plans? Grand Haven has got the huge chunk of property that's within the city of Grand Haven out next to Kitchelink Dunes Preserve. They desperately need money, and that easily could be residential. We had a meeting in April regarding Ottawa Sands, and a Grand Haven City Council member was there and laid out the financial situation of the city, and I could see them allowing that to go residential, just for increased tax base. There's been talk of them doing something with the airport as well, at least with one of the 2 runways, just to get some more land for development. Sure would love to see more development of a Ferrysburg downtown, whether it's on Pine Street, whether it's out past the fire barn corner and beyond. I don't really know there. And then also something we've talked about previously has been the electric vehicle charging stations, and that's not in our master plan at all. about what's coming down the pipe. So that's all I have to say.
Just to clarify, Regina brought up the economic development, the task force. That has been disbanded but folded into the brownfield. We have a meeting next week on brownfield. So, so a lot of the goals in brownfield should align with what the planning commission has. And because we're talking about open space, we take the same numbers, open space, and use those in brownfield economic development, if we pull those out. So there's gotta be, in my opinion, some collaboration. That's where a couple of us are around both those bodies.
But is my understanding correct that the only brownfield property that we would even be able to entertain is Verplanks within the city?
No. The whole city is brownfield.
The whole city?
Yes, that was done for a reason. Spring Lake, Village of Spring Lake is too. And that is so you don't put a stigma on any particular piece of property. We thought the tank farm might be, not a leak out there. It's incredible. So what Verplank says, the stuff they bring in there is not hazardous, and they pretty well keep their motor oil and all that stuff cleaned up. So I'm not sure if that would be a problem, but the whole city is brownfield. So it would qualify, and you can qualify for other reasons besides contamination too. There's other grants you can get and things like that. So that's why we folded the two together, task force, because the county has the same way. The county has a brownfield and a task force. That's what they do. So.
I may speak again. I certainly, once again, Regina, I certainly like your idea about what North Muskegon did. And it's interesting, they're a community that's very similar to Ferrysburg in terms of being a bedroom community. They've lost a lot of retail, that's all gone. And they have a lot of waterfront property, and they are pinched for space. They're pinched for space and for revenue. And I certainly like the community meetings. I think that's a great thing.
I think we've made up our mind here. So I think the consensus here is we want to go ahead and do something here. So.
Mr. Chairman, I think the next step would be to consider a scope for the project. So, there could be a menu of options, community survey, there could be a visual preference survey, public workshops. So maybe what we can do is work through a menu of options at your next meeting, and just so we know how to move forward with the project. And I don't feel like it doesn't seem like there's a particular rush to get this through based on any upcoming development or big decision, but so I think we can take our time and do it right and map out a timeline with the components that you want to cover, and then move forward with it.
It might include a special meeting then a week after our normal time next in August. That falls in Coast Guard. That's why that's possible. I'm just thinking the scope, I think, could be laid out pretty quickly. Without a scope, you're kind of stuck for a while. I hate to lose a month. Personally, at my age, gotta keep going.
Can I be reminded, do we have a deadline to complete the project? Was it 1 year, or is there not a deadline?
None at all.
Okay, it seems like it went on even past that, maybe last time. Maybe that seems like it wasn't that long ago when it happened. Okay.
Yeah, I think a year for the extent of the changes we had in, I think, 2017, a year makes sense for that scope. But I don't think, as much as we can involve the public, do surveys, open houses, I think the number of changes are going to be far fewer than the past project. So I think it would be more an abbreviated schedule, but we could still pull in all the public input process that you wish.
5 years ago, what opportunities did we have for the public to give input? I don't know if that's a Craig question or.
We had, at least
I know there was an
least one or two
in-person
meetings.
session.
Room, you know.
Workshop type thing where we had stations.
Okay.
I shouldn't say we, I was part of the public at that point, but.
Was that one night?
But we started out with a community survey to get feedback from the residents, and then we gave that information to the planning commission members, and they started working on the master plan
Was that survey electronic or was it?
electronically.
Yeah.
The 2018 plan was adopted on December 17th, 2018. So we must have started earlier in the year
2017.
to get it done. It was the same year. Doesn't have to be, but.
So at our next meeting, let's have one of the agenda items, Craig, be thoughts about the scope of what we're going to do here. We'll discuss that. Does that make sense? Okay. We've done that. Thank you. Bylaws, agenda item number 8. This is interesting. I've served on this body for a long time, and I guess I always thought maybe there are some bylaws, but I got to tell you, I don't remember ever sitting there reading them or anything,
No.
knowing what they were.
Never.
And Craig has found some bylaws here that were passed, actually not that long ago. I think it's signed here in 2009. And David has kindly put together a draft of something. And as I read carefully through your draft and thought about how we do things here, some things we're doing here don't correspond with how your draft lays them out. And don't know, David, is this from your experience of doing this sort of thing for other communities? How you think the bylaws ought to be? Or is there some new state regulations that say it all has to have these things in it, or?
The Planning Enabling Act simply says that the Planning Commission may adopt bylaws to help facilitate its business. This is a model. I suppose I use portions of the template that the Michigan State Extension Office has put out. I don't take that word for word. I think there's some good parts of that, but others I think make better sense based on our local practices, as well as just things I think might work a little bit better. But I think overall, content-wise, this is what a comprehensive set of bylaws would include. I think some of the, for instance, selection of officers. Different communities are going to have different ways to do that. This has a very mapped out way to elect officers. It's not always this formal. Doesn't mean you have to do this. It's just a suggestion, or we could summarize that or abbreviate that process. I think another one would be concerning the meetings, the agenda and order of business. I tried to model the way our agendas usually are outlined for 4.7 order of business. And then I think Article 5 is one that really kind of establishes a formal process for considering an agenda item and holding a public hearing. So in a lot of these are anticipating that these are things that can keep you out of trouble if there is a particularly contentious meeting. So if you have a lot of input, if it's a project that's very concerning the community, this is something that keeping to a very strict script in a way keeps things orderly. The public hearings would run smooth. And again, when we have just a couple people in the crowd, this is certainly not essential to follow word for word, but strict order events for considering public hearings and considering applications. It's important when it's something that could be controversial or a room full of people. It's important to run a tight ship on those nights. So, and again, we could say, you could even, I want to say, water this down a bit to say at the discretion of the planning commission, this process could be used in the event that there's a particular type of public hearing held. Or so I guess I'm curious to hear your input on what you think is far off from what we practice, or more too formal for what we practice, because it certainly doesn't have to be this much of a script.
When you drafted this, did you have an eye at all on what had been passed in 2009? Or did you just go from scratch?
I took a look at it and noted that there wasn't much to it, and I think everything that's in there is covered topic-wise, but
Okay.
This does certainly provide a bit more detail than the 2-page version. So.
And, you know, a question I would have about these rules, are these rules really basically internal for us? We make the rules and we follow them? Or does city council have to, does this go to city council and the city council says, oh, these are their bylaws, okay. Apparently it went to somebody here, planning commission secretary. But I guess city council didn't sign off on the stuff in 2009.
That's a really good question. I did talk to Craig about that before the meeting. Some communities, the planning commission can just adopt their own bylaws. I believe the last one was developed and recommended by the planning commission, and then ultimately approved or certified by the council. So I think that's what we would have to change the adoption portion to say that's a recommendation, then ultimately signed off by the council.
Greg, do you know the answer to this? Will the city council want to, or Richard, will they want to say, you guys, you can't just make up your own rules. We want to see what you're doing down there. And
Well, last time in 2009, it was approved by city council.
okay,
So it's up to the planning commission to go either way. I'm not sure what city council has discussed it.
That we have no.
Does the city council have bylaws?
No charter.
I have a question. What's the relationship between the bylaws and ordinances? We have ordinances that define some of these things as well, such as conflict of interest. The ZBA, for instance, must have by ordinance a member of this committee and a member of council. So if that needs to be changed, it's going to have to go through a lot of rigmarole. You can't just say it's not right. And the same with all of our composition, our setup of officers. What's the relationship between bylaws? Don't they have to first run true to ordinance?
Well, they need to be consistent with the ordinance, but this provides more of your operational procedures to run a meeting, and a bit more guidance on the conflict of interest, things like that. And, just so that there is no question on those more contentious or controversial type applications.
Have clarified that their terms of office, 1.6C, membership after expiration of term, a member shall hold office until their successor is appointed.
That's the
Thank you.
Roger Jonas clause.
That's by ordinance too. That's by ordinance as well.
And that's correct. Some of these references and certain sections are specifically what's in the Planning Enabling Act or in ordinance, but it's in a format that's kind of summarized in your operational procedures. So we have to be consistent with the statute and local ordinance, but this is a way to kind of summarize it into one document that everyone can understand. You know where it is, you know where to find it, rather than digging through an ordinance or the Planning Enabling Act to find something.
I didn't get a chance to go on the website of the Michigan State Extension Citizen Planner to see if they had some kind of a template or not.
Yes, I did, and
Okay.
And actually I did that a few years ago with various versions of this document, and this is one that I've been working on, and it's been evolving over time, and so I think it's improved from that version. I mean, I think that one was good, but it also includes a lot of material that's not applicable to us. So there is some that's certainly beyond what we would need, But it covers all the essentials that were covered in that template, and then makes some variations based on our local practices and zoning ordinance.
So a question I have here is, we're considering a work session here on bylaws. Is that because we think we need to have a better set of bylaws, or is somebody telling us to do this? Or what's prompting us to consider this now?
There was a council member who took the citizen planner course, and after he got done with the course, his comment was that our bylaws are not sufficient enough, that we should have more meat in the bylaws. So I asked Dave and Brooke to look at it, and they came up with something that's a little more in depth than what we currently have.
Thank you, that explains it. So let me give you some feedback, David. You asked for where you think we do things differently from what's in here. Just a thought here on page 4 of your draft here. Near the bottom, near the bottom of the page, there's a C, and then there's number 1, which says minutes. In the last full line of type there, it says delegates shall submit the official minutes of all planning commission. I think you need to insert meetings prior to the following meeting. Just a little editorial thought. On the next page, we talk about the annual report, and it's not clear in here whose duty it is to prepare an annual report. Now, I know that Craig puts together a document that shows every item that we've kind of passed and so forth. Is that the annual report, or who puts together an annual report? What has to be in the annual report? And I know that the council representative, it says later here, presents it to city council. But is that an annual? Is that the annual report? The old bylaws also talked about an annual report.
What page are you?
Well, just page 5 near the top. Duty of city council representative ex officio. And in that line there, it says at the end, and shall present the annual report. So talking about Richard here. But my question is, Richard is going to have to present it, but who creates it? And is it simply what Craig puts together at the end of the year?
Well, yeah, 6.3 includes, page 11 would be the requirements of an annual report. And I think that staff report, it covers most of those. And typically, a staff member prepares the annual report for the planning commission's consideration. It sums up the prior year, and then a lot of times it sets goals for the upcoming year. And I think that's the most important to, if you are working on an annual report and you say, we want to work on a master plan this year, or we think there's a couple zoning tweaks that are needed, the annual report's a good way to convey those goals and objectives to the city council on an annual basis. So, once a year, let's just say January every year, you take a step back and look at, consider the prior year, think about what needs to be done in the next 12 months, and run it officially through the council through this report. It's just a good way to forward along that information and really in an official manner.
I don't think we've done that sort of thing, have we, Craig?
Council gets a copy of all the attendance records from all the boards, and they'll have a copy of what's every agenda item for the planning commission. And I think the planning commission also gets a copy of that and a copy from the zoning board of appeals, their actions.
That constitutes basically the annual report, but it hasn't.
We don't, there hasn't been any, I've never reported on training and common enforcement or appeal issues. They get the zoning board of appeals agenda items, but enforcement, that hasn't been distributed to the planning commission in the past, but it can be. Enforcement, you're talking zoning enforcement or city code?
Zoning enforcement. So anything that the planning commission would be involved with ordinance-wise that has to be enforced by the zoning administrator.
Okay, on page 6, point 2.2, abstention from voting. The last sentence in that paragraph says, "A member shall not abstain from voting for any other reason, including actions considering the minutes of a meeting at which the member was absent." I guess as a member of a body, whenever I miss a meeting and I go to the next meeting and the minutes are prepared, I always feel at a loss whether I should be voting yes or no, because I wasn't there. I don't know if those minutes reflected what actually happened. So I usually, my action is to abstain. I let the people who were there say yes or no. Is this, I don't know, is this what we're doing? Is everyone, you miss a meeting and you're at the next meeting and the minutes come up, you vote? Is that what we've been doing or what?
Supposed to watch it on YouTube.
Yeah, now that they're
Yep.
video recorded, I think this might be a point.
I'm sorry, what?
Just, because we're recorded, I think a lot of us have been just watching the video online when we're absent, so,
Okay.
yeah. Maybe this didn't exist before, but.
Robert's Rules of Order specifically says that that is something that you can do, that there's nothing that would prevent a member who was absent to vote on the minutes. And a lot of times it's encouraged to vote on those because you're certifying that you're trusting that it's an accurate record. You're putting the trust in the recording secretary to create those minutes for your review.
So this is saying, no, you have to vote, yes.
Yes,
No,
and you could strike that. It's just a suggestion. You could run into a situation where you might have might not be able to get a full vote on something if a couple people were absent at the previous meeting, and then you have different people absent at the meeting that you're looking to approve your minutes. So there could be times where your minutes would be bumped a month or two. But again, I don't think we run across any issues with this in the last few years. But that can be struck. It's your preference.
I don't really care. And Jordan made a good point. Some of us were not here watching, and though we weren't there, you saw it. So, okay, leave it alone. On page 7, 4.1, it says regular meetings in accordance with the annual calendar adopted by the Planning Commission prior to the beginning of each calendar year. We haven't adopted an annual meeting, or have we, Craig? Do we have a?
No, we have not.
We have not done that, so that would be something new for us.
Yes, it's something that should be adopted and published. And the 4, you have to hold no less than 4, so you have to make sure that schedule recognizes that no less than 4 have to be held.
Forward here.
Excuse me, what do you mean published?
I believe that's referenced in the Zoning Enabling Act, or the Planning Enabling Act. I can pull that reference though, but believe that it published as in just posted on.
Posted?
Posted,
or is
posted.
that posted?
Yeah, not published in the
Not a-
newspaper. or anything
not
like
a
that,
legal
but posted.
notice.
Okay.
Yeah.
On page 9, site visits at the top. It says if determined by the Planning Commission that a site visit by a quorum of the members is essential to conduct business and to make an informed decision on a matter, it shall be treated as an official meeting and advertised and so forth. I think lots of times we talk about things and vote on them, and many of us individually have gone and looked at the site, but we didn't go as a group. Is this saying if we're at a meeting and we got an issue and we say, gosh, we really ought to collectively look at that? Is that what we're saying here? Then, because I don't think we've ever done that. Well, maybe we did a visit at the Verplanks when they were building that new building. But I don't think everybody went. So I don't think we've ever, what I'm saying is I don't think we've ever done what 4.10 is talking about there.
It's an option. I mean, if you could, your policy could be that you don't hold meetings off-site. But this is allowable per the Open Meetings Act. It happens. I've think I've done it once or twice in the past several years in other communities, but we had to post the meeting, state where it was, state the location, and then put out the requested. So if you do have any sort of special needs, that we would be able to accommodate them. So we put out the notice that if you need some sort of assistance with the site visit, you know, the jurisdiction would have to provide some reasonable accommodation.
John, we typically do that now. So recently there was a meeting of the Recreation Commission that was scheduled, and we published that real fast. So when the commissioners all got together. So we kind of keep an eye on that.
KLH as well meets out at the barn.
Yes, yep.
Mhm.
Further down that page, item D2, here's something where we do differently than this says here. It says, the person addressing the planning commission may state their name and address. We tell them to state their name and address here.
Must.
Yes.
I would run that by the city attorney, because I don't believe that you can require them to give a name and address for the Open Meetings Act.
Ask.
You can't prohibit someone from making public comment if they don't provide that information.
Tell us your name and address. Is that how we should do it?
Would you please?
Would you please?
Yeah, so the record accurately reflects your comments. Could you please give your name and address?
Does this stand for city council too? That they don't have to give their name and address? I mean, I know there are rules that you should not be made to write your name and address in order to speak, but I thought it was perfectly fine to require someone to say their name and address. I mean, if you don't live here, you can talk to us. Some places I've read do not allow that. If you don't live here, you can't speak at city council. But we do, but you know, your opinion is going to be weighed against someone that's living here and paying taxes here and raising their kids here. So they don't have to give any information about where they live at all? That just seems dangerous.
I'll double check, attorney.
Okay, thanks.
And I think that's one thing where if you don't know where they're from and who they are, that's how much weight you give their comment. So they may be someone from out of state. So
Oh, yeah. Could happen.
On page 10, number 7 at the top there, it says, this is talking about hearings. It says, when no other attendee wishes to provide public comment, the chair may request a motion to close the public hearing. We haven't done motions to close public hearings, have we? We just say, I'll close the public hearing now.
that's one that I couldn't recall if you did or not. Some chairs will officially open and close. Some will open then ask for a motion to close. It's all local preference. I think the chair just opening it and closing it on the record with the time of it opening and closing is just fine. So
Let's not have that in their request motions. I think we're doing too much there. Now, another issue that's different in 5.2, just a little bit below that. Official review of application shall occur in the following manner. Explanation of request as received by the city, by the chair, comments by the applicant, and then item C says review recommendation by the zoning administrator or city representative and consultants. And then item D, opening and closing of the public hearing if applicable, or non-hearing public comments if authorized by the chair, and immediate general discussion. We've waited till we have our own general discussion before we read your official commentary, David, or Craig's, if he has written one. This is saying right in the opening, before the public is even responding, that they should hear what you've said. That's a little bit different order, right? So totally different. So
few comments prior to versus after the public comment. And I found other communities having that overview from the chair, the applicant, and staff provides the public with that background and context to the application. And sometimes it helps to, there might be some misunderstandings or misconceptions of what's being proposed. I think that clears up a lot of issues prior to public comment. So sometimes the public comment may be a lot shorter if their question is answered during those introduction statements. So it's something I recommend, but it's completely up to you.
I think it makes a lot of sense. So, I think if there's an agreement, that's how we ought to operate going forward.
I think that my question, though, if I may speak, is
course.
comments by the applicant, and then you don't have any general discussion by the planning commission and questions until section E. Well, he'd have to come back to answer the questions. Wouldn't we want the questions to be during the comments by the applicant, as we did tonight? We ask him questions, and that seems kind of backwards to me.
It's kind of, it keeps an order of business. I think sometimes it gives them the opportunity just to give their formal presentation. And then the discussion occurs after you've heard from everyone. And then in that point, you have the discretion to call on staff, call on the applicant to answer questions, or even ask for clarifications of comments from the public as well.
What if the applicant invites questions?
I'm sorry, if the applicant asks questions?
No, it says, are there any questions? Looking right at us.
Yeah, you could add in at the discretion of the chair. Discussion can occur after that person. Or we could add in we could say official review of applications shall generally follow this order. Or you could add in, or you could switch around the order a bit, or just clarify that you may ask questions ahead of the staff comments or the public comment.
Is I think one thing that we do here is, and I think John would agree with this because he's referred to it already, and that is I know we have to operate by certain rules, however, we're kind of a friendly group. And we like to be able to talk about it back and forth with our fellow citizens so they'll know. And it's more of a conversation that is, okay, my turn to talk, you can't say anything, you're already past your time. So we like that back and forth more, am I right? And I like that interaction that we've had between ourselves and the audience, as long as it's civil, stand up and.
My only recommendation is that there's a couple steps that are formal and stricter prior to that open
That have to be
conversation.
done, right?
And really, you're a good group. You have experience here, plus people who have been taking the courses and training. You know how to stay out of trouble for the most part. I've seen some planning commissions meetings go off the rails significantly and sometimes even leading to legal issues. So this is a way to kind of keep things in order, but yeah, I completely understand. This is a small community. You have a lot of experience up here. You know how to keep order of a meeting. Sometimes things get a little bit out of control and you call for a point of order. So if you don't want this structure, I mean, you can say that at the discretion for certain meetings. This would be so like maybe if they're at the discretion of the chair or on the concurring vote of the planning commission, you would keep to this schedule for a certain item. If it was a major PUD process or something, you could kind of give yourself an out to just either follow the process or not.
You know we're your favorite client.
Oh yeah, of course.
By giving ourselves an out, David, does that give enough consistency to a developer knowing what they're going to face when they walk in the door? Knowing that we might change the rules of the game?
My opinion is consistency is the best approach. And I would,
not to interrupt you, but we've been consistent with how we've handled things, right, for years. And it's worked, and it allows good interaction like Mr. Jonas talks about.
I mean, one thing you could just say comments by the applicant and questions from the planning commission. We could just kind of clarify that you have the opportunity to ask questions at that time if you wish. And the same thing with C and questions and answers from planning commission to staff. So we can add those in.
Next page, page 11, here's something where I'm pretty sure we don't do this. The second, or the first complete paragraph up there. It says the minutes shall also reflect attendance of and absences of members and shall indicate whether the absences were excused or unexcused by the chair. The members making a motion and supporting the motion shall be recorded in the meeting minutes, comma, along with the vote of each member for every item requiring action. Is that saying you simply want the tally of the yeas and nays, or are you going to want to know each one of us a yes or no on the vote?
Asking for a roll call vote
Yeah, that's.
on every thing that we get involved in?
That's how I'm interpreting that as possibly meaning.
We actually have, that's the roll call versus just, we do have a voting section in here, and it gives, okay. Okay, 4.5 says voting shall be by voice vote or roll call vote, shall be required if requested by any planning commission member or directed by the chair. So it allows you to do voice vote, or if it's something that you feel is important enough to have individual roll call vote, you have that option. But then as it relates to the subject paragraph, this is saying that it's not just a tally, but you should record the vote of every member. That's, I mean,
In other words, a roll call vote.
well, we would simply note who the number and who voted yes or no.
Yeah.
So based on a voice vote, and you may not do that now, but it's just so I mean it's something that it's I think it makes sense, but sometimes it's more important when we are adopting a resolution to recommend a project or to approve a project. You don't always do that. A lot of times I don't think you really use resolutions much to recommend projects, but if you did, that would be important because the resolution should note those members who voted yes versus no. Again, it's not, I don't think it's required, but it's something that I'd recommend just to keep formal records.
This adds more work for Craig.
Every city council vote that they have is not roll call. You know, yeas versus nays, most of the time voice vote. And most of the time, there are times when roll call is essential, yes. And I guess spelling those times out, when it's absolutely required, might be easier than.
Well, a voice vote doesn't preclude indicating the vote of each member. I'm recording secretary in 2 different boards and commissions, and they'll do the voice vote, and I'll typically clarify after the vote, sir, ma'am, what was your vote, just so I can ensure that I have everyone. So I mean, again, it's just if you don't wish to do that, you don't have to.
Only if you get nays.
Yeah, it doesn't come up very often.
Preference here.
I
Yes.
think in a lot of city council minutes, I think I've seen where it will say, 5 yeas, 2 nays, and then they would put in parentheses, the 2 nays, rather than listing a voice vote or a roll call vote for each. But it does kind of specify who the nays were. Does that sound accurate?
So Craig's going to have to know, when some of us don't always say yes, who they were. Yeah, who's saying no?
He knows who's here, so we can go from there. And just subtract the nays from the people in attendance. Everybody left over was here. It was a yay.
That part's simple. So is that what we want to do? We want to identify who the nays were? You tell me.
I thought that was the way we were already doing it. But.
The A's are implicit.
Yeah.
The nays stand out.
But you want the minutes to you say Jonas said no. 2 no's, Jonas and
I
Rifle.
think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, I'm okay with that, yeah,
which
okay,
is,
so,
Mr. Carlson said no
yeah.
on the one big thing that we worked on 2 years ago.
That is my laundry list of stuff, and my, you colleagues, do you have thoughts here about? Yes,
Okay, I have a couple different notes. I feel like sometimes the more regulation we put in, the more we're setting up for just making sure that we cover all bases, I guess. I've got a few notes here. 4.6, open public meetings. At the bottom,
Page 8.
the bottom line, it says a person shall not be excluded from a meeting of the planning commission and except for a breach of the peace committed at the meeting. I just wonder if we have defined breach of the peace and who determines that. If we have a problem at public comment, is it at the discretion of the chair? Or how, you know, I mean, it's few and far between. I think that happens here, and we always have such a good decorum. But if we're going to have this written in our rules, how is that defined, and who decides if somebody in the audience is breach of the peace?
Is to the discretion of the chair, but I agree, we could define that, what exactly is a breach of peace. So I think that, I'm pretty sure I can find some language on that. I think it's probably something that should be, one person's thought of breach of peace might be quite different than someone else's, so.
Right. And then let's see, 5.1A. Again, I think this body has had really good decorum. I mean, I've been coming to these meetings since 2016, and I just think there's always been a very good interaction between the public and the board, and I just don't want to make it so, the rules so tight that we lose some of that interaction. It says, let's see, I do agree that everything definitely should go through the chair. Let's see, it says no planning member should debate or argue with any person in the audience, but rather address all comments through the chair. Does that restrict us from having a healthy conversation? If somebody does ask a question and it's allowed through the chair, are we allowed to respond, or do we have to respond through the chair?
Formalized, or it can be informal. It's just, this whole draft is, as you can tell, on the formal side of things.
Right.
And so I think it's to your discretion if you'd like to loosen it up a bit.
Okay. And then kind of along the same lines, 5.1, number 6, it says during public hearing or public comment period, planning commission applicant and staff should not be required and are not encouraged to answer questions posed by the member of the public unless deemed appropriate by the chair. The part that says and are not encouraged, I just wondered on that one. I know in some of our like ethics and conduct ordinances, I know this might just pertain to city council, but I think that we're never encouraged to be restricting information to the public. In this, I'm wondering, why would we be encouraged not to answer? You know, because it's really encompasses Craig and pretty much everybody on the planning commission to not give answers to the public. So I don't know if this is something that can be worded differently, or just even take out that part. It says and are not encouraged. I can see that we're not required to respond, but why would we not encourage information being given?
Because with strict parliamentary procedure, public comments are given to the chair, and then when a public comment session is closed, the chair typically asks other planning commission members to respond, or ask the staff for clarification, or can even ask the member of the public or the applicant. So it's very common. A lot of chairs do restrict any sort of two-way communication during public comments. I have some that follow so strictly, if a question's answered, they look and they just nod and they say, thank you for your public comment. That's the strictest form of Robert's Rules of Order. So, and it is done because in some communities that is needed because otherwise it becomes a circus of discussions and debate between planning commission members and members of the public. So those keeping it strict is important in certain communities, but.
Understood. Okay. Let's see. And then my last question is Article 7 amendments. It says these bylaws may be amended by 2/3 majority of the membership of the Planning Commission. And I thought this was something, if we did want to make any changes, that would have to go through City Council?
Correct.
Okay.
And so we did confirm that
Okay.
that was the past practice, and I think what we can just say is a majority vote would probably make sense. A majority vote to recommend amendment, and then approved by the City Council. So I think the amendments and the adoption and repeal section should reflect the City Council's ultimate approval authority.
By majority vote, not 2/3.
I think that would be fine. I do see the 2/3 majority on certain cases. For instance, a master plan has to be adopted by 2/3 rather than a simple majority. So
If I may say something, it seems to me we have a well-run planning commission, and these are things that keep people who don't have well-run planning commissions in line. And I also think when you have a fair and unbiased council, you don't need to worry that they're going to come back at you about these things. Like, oh my gosh, you interacted with a person. You actually asked them a question instead of being quiet and going through the chair. And I don't want to operate that way. If somebody asks me a question, I'm not going to say, well, I could, if I may, you can ask, but I'm not going to answer. That is not service. And, you know, that I think we may need these because we have to have control. But I think in a well-run council and a well-run planning commission, these are not weapons. These are guidelines and safeguards for people. It's just my opinion.
in those cases, and I agree, there is a lot of criticism at times when someone from the public gets up and they ask a question during public comment and then you get a blank stare. That does receive criticism. Unless someone is diligent about recording those questions and reporting after the public comment session. But that doesn't always happen. I try to make sure it happens, but you're correct, though. It can lead to a situation where someone is going to criticize you for not being, not practicing good customer service. So agree.
Have to look at Spring Lake Township and see what's going on there. People are incensed that they are given this blank stare and no one's interacting with them.
And these are, I mean, as I said before, these are on the strict side, and these do, I guess you can assume that these are much more important if you had 2 or 3 site plans, 2 or 3 public hearings every meeting. So with the workload we have here, it is less important to keep to this strict of a guideline. But if you had 3, 4 public hearings in a meeting, large crowd, things need to move efficiently and orderly, or otherwise some communities are there well after midnight in some cases if meetings aren't run well.
Mr. Chair, can I ask one more question? This section about caucusing, have we ever been in a situation where we've had the public go to caucus? It is... It's pretty irrelevant. I don't know. Is that something that's standard? And
Well, it's a common allowance.
it is, okay.
So that
I'm fine with it. I just wondered if that was a common.
Yeah. For instance, if it was a community next to a project and there's an HOA president or something like that, and you could give them 10 minutes as opposed to 3, because they're reporting on the collective group, and that has that's it's intended to ensure that, they are accurate, they're reflecting the will and the desires of that group of people. But if they're not speaking for that group, certainly you wouldn't allow that extra time. It's not that common that you're gonna run across something like that, but it happens.
I have one question. That is, David, this is being driven by a comment from a city council member that was asked of Craig. Okay. Is there anything in here that's gonna really hamstring us, or that we're not doing appropriately now that's standing out glaring? I didn't see anything in there, and I guess my concern is that planning is just what, for lack of a better term, consultant to the council, but ZBA is legally binding, for lack of a better term, right? Unappealable, except by the legal system. Oh, yes, that's true, that's true. But I'm talking about when somebody comes to us with a site plan or something like that. Is there anything that we're not abiding by now that would raise major red flags in terms of makeup of this board or anything like that?
I think at times things can get a little loose in terms of conversations between applicant and the public. I don't think anything has been overly concerning.
Applicant and the public, you mean board members and the?
Yes, yeah, planning
Okay.
commission, public, or even applicant and the public. Sometimes there's interactions. So, I mean, it's the environment here is low volume of applications. It's a small community. People know each other. There's a certain amount of respect people have for each other here. You don't always find that. So, I think allowing for a little bit more of a flexible, looser procedure I haven't noticed any problems necessarily here. Sometimes
Well, and
sometimes
is this gonna potentially catch us in a situation where we're not doing some of this that we're gonna suddenly mandate ourselves to be doing?
So having some sort of procedural challenge because you didn't follow this man. I've never heard of a challenge as long as you're following the procedures of the zoning ordinance for an application. So you open it up for public comment. You are reviewing against the standards and requirements of the zoning ordinance. I don't think you would have the procedural due process challenges at that point. If you're following the book in terms of what you need to do to consider an application, giving opportunity for the applicant to present their case, public comment, if you're consistently following the requirements of the zoning ordinance and the processes noted there, could you be challenged for doing something a bit out of order on your on the Article 5.2 review of applications? I haven't heard of anything like that, but you could certainly be criticized for it. But
Thank you.
legally challenged, I might need to run that by the city attorney.
Okay,
That was a question I had as well.
yeah.
I've never come across a case where I've heard of something more than criticism for not following your bylaws.
Thank you.
But
Roger, did you have anything you wanted to add to suggestions for modifications here?
It bored me so much, I had to leave the room, I'm sorry. I've been talking too much. Well, I think it's good suggestions.
Okay. Looking at our agenda, and it's over 2 hours here now. I hate a meeting runs over 2 hours. We have to do some things here, but I'm thinking maybe we should just defer the work session on Economic Development Task Force until the next meeting. Does that make any sense with folks here or not?
Mr. Chair, is there anything pressing that we need to do with that?
I don't think so. No,
Okay.
No. So what do we have to have a vote on this, or? Yeah. Okay, what are we gonna do? Vote to defer the,
Mr. Chair,
yes.
I move that we move the work session for the economic development to the next meeting.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and second. We defer the work session on economic development to the next meeting. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, we're good. We're gonna defer that one. And then the last items of business we need to get done here are officers here for this coming year. So we need a chairperson for this coming year. Yes, I guess table's open here for nominations for service as a chairperson for 23-24.
I would like to nominate John Rifle for our chairperson.
Okay.
The nominations be closed.
Wait, there's too many motions here. We need to have the opportunity to recognize any other nominations. Anyone else want to nominate someone? This is scary. Okay, well, let's vote on it then. So someone, you moved and seconded to nominate John Rifle, is that right? Is there any discussion on the issue? Okay, let's vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I'm tempted to say no, but opposed and abstentions. Okay,
Mr. Chair, may I make a nomination for vice chairperson?
yes.
I would like to nominate Regina Schoberg.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Before we close this, is there anyone else who would like to make a nomination here? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Let's take a vote. All in favor of Regina Schulberg as vice chair for this coming year, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Boy, we are we're on a roll here. Selection of secretary for 23-24. Nominate Craig.
Oh, I'd like to nominate Craig Bessinger as secretary for 2023-2024.
Support.
It's been moved and seconded. We select Craig Bessinger as our secretary. And you know, I'm not even going to ask for any other nominations because I'm pretty sure no one would want to do that job. So all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right. Excellent. Okay, and so we're down, thank you, folks, that was quick. Public comments. We're open for public comments. Would our member of the audience here care to, and I guess we can't tell you to, would you like to share your name and your address?
I would love to. Dave Cook, 17605 168th Avenue. I have a couple public comments I'd like to make. The first one is a question. I wonder if there's some reason why the entire packet can't be posted on the website in addition to the agenda. You don't have to answer that right now. Mr. Brockmeyer's presentation was part of your packet, as well as the draft bylaws. Just didn't know if there was a reason why, specifically technologically or otherwise, that information's not available to the public prior to a meeting. You may receive more public comment and public participation if those materials can be reviewed by members of the public beforehand.
Okay, thank you.
The second comment I'd like to make is regarding Brockmeyer's proposed development. I live about 4 parcels south of his development. I would need more information about it. A couple of observations I made was there was a couple comments that there's limited parcels in the city to develop. Unless I'm grossly misunderstanding, the 2 parcels in question are already developed. There are already homes on each respective parcel that are going to be demolished to build almost multi-million-dollar condominiums. The second observation I'd like to make is there would be possibly 22 cars parked on a parcel that is less than 4 acres. 168th already has problems with traffic, specifically speeding, and other people traversing on the roadway. The roadway is already in very poor condition. I've personally seen people launch their vehicles over parts of the roadway, and they don't even look back. They don't even know what happened. Another comment that was made tonight was in regards to affordable housing. I don't think there are too many people who can afford a $600,000 to $1 million condominium, especially if they're getting a mortgage at 7%. I really like the comment about tiny homes. I know that there has been development in Muskegon. I think that's something that you guys should look into and maybe research whether that would be feasible in this area, not only for people to live permanently, but maybe for visitors to the area. I know that there's limited vacancy in the Tri-Cities, especially during Coast Guard. I think that's something that could be beneficial to multiple people in the area. Those are the only comments I have tonight, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cook, for your thoughtful comments. Appreciate it. And for your endurance to last the whole time of this meeting. Okay, let's close public comments at 9:17. Zoning Minister's report.
No report?
Okay, Chairman's report. No, no report. Let me just ask something. When is our next meeting?
So if there's nothing major going on for the August meeting, that will be canceled. And then the next one will be the first Thursday in September.
I'm going to be on a cruise in early August, so I wouldn't be here for one. Let's see here.
Cruising to.
Eastern Caribbean
Oh,
with the grandkids, so that's
okay.
why you don't normally want to do a cruise in the summer. You want to do it in February or something, but
The
kids are in
Disney
school.
cruise? Disney cruise?
No, they've done one of those.
Okay.
Yeah, we're leaving on the 5th, so, so actually, the meeting would have been on the 3rd, then I wouldn't have left it yet if we had it first Thursday. But you're saying we'll cancel it if, unless something comes up.
That's correct.
Okay. So I would be able to make it, I guess, now that I look at my calendar. Okay, that's my comments. Members, reports, comments. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to share, we had our first food truck musical night at William Ferry Park. I don't know if any of you were in attendance, but it was really well received by the city. We had a couple food trucks, we had Electric Red as a band, and we have 2 more coming up this summer. The next one is July 19th. It's a Wednesday from 6 to 8. We'll have some food trucks again. Coots is going to be, that's the name of the band. They're a jazz band that's coming. So I hope that you can all come out and tell your friends about it.
This is where at?
At William Ferry Park. Yeah, yeah. So that's my only report.
Anyone else?
I just finished the MSU Citizen Planner course, which was a lot of fun over 6 weeks, 3 hours every Tuesday evening. I learned a lot. It was quite interesting. You bet.
Only that I strongly encourage taking those courses by everybody, if you can. You do them online. I used to have to drive to East Lansing and either spend a long day there in the summertime or overnight once a year and to get my master citizen planner, but I think it's well worth it. Keep up on it. And I still do some of the webinars, only because, especially when the laws change, government, different kinds of decisions made by the courts regarding what, so it's kind of fun to keep up with. I'm kind of a geek. Anyone else?